Now that you've completed the Easy Beat system, it's time to add a little bit of fills within your beats. So I created something called the Drum Fill Builder. And this is, again, a simple and easy way to write your own drum fills and to really work on your creativity as a drummer. Because I know every drummer wants to be able to sit down at the drums and just come up with fills and just be able to play something naturally that doesn't sound forced, that doesn't sound like it came from a sheet of paper. And I think after you work through the Drum Fill Builder, and especially considering you have a very good sense of all the note values, you're going to be able to do this in a very, very short amount of time, which is awesome because that's what you really, really want. You really just want freedom on the drum set. So I basically created a 3-step system to help you build your fills. So take a look at the sheet music and we'll talk about each step individually. Now the first step is rhythm. What is the rhythm of what you're going to play on the drum set? And just play that with your hands on the snare drum alone. So take a look at exercise 1. Now this is basic, okay? I've made it as basic as possible on number 1, just so we can get a grasp of each step. Once we do that, you can see, if you look down the page, we're going to get into some more complex fills. And this is something you can do as well. You can create a very complex rhythm and then build it up however you want it. You can make it more complex. You can even start to simplify it if you really, really want to. So look at the rhythm of number 1. Okay? It's just straight 8th notes on the snare drum. Now step 2 is voice, and I'm not going to ask you to start singing or anything like that, so don't worry. I call each drum its own voice. So each drum has a certain way of speaking and a certain tone to it, and each drum or each cymbal is a complete individual on its own. So from there, we take that rhythm, which is just straight 8th notes, and now we apply that to different voices on the drum set. So what I've done is I've just done a basic fill, basic around-the-world drum fill, 2 on the snare, 2 on the high tom, 2 on the mid tom, 2 on the low tom. But you really can see what you could do with this. You know, if you really spend a couple hours on a very difficult rhythm, and you get that rhythm on the snare drum, now you can start choosing what voices you want to hit that rhythm on. So let's just move this around the kit as written on exercise 1. And the third step in the Drum Fill Builder is feet. What are you going to do with your feet in the fill? Too many times I hear new drummers, they'll play a groove, their bass drum sounding great, it's tons. It's like, you know, drummers are into metal and all these crazy different styles nowadays. So they're playing groove with tons of bass drum in there, and then they go to do a fill and everything just drops out. The whole bottom drops out of the fill. And it doesn't always sound that good. So adding in the feet doesn't mean it has to be ultra complex. It just means it has to kind of give that fill a little bit more presence and a little bit more thickness rather than it's all of a sudden sounding thin. Because a fill is supposed to release the tension of the music or kind of change from the actual beat. And so you don't have to play the exact same pattern you're playing in the beat, but it's nice to do something with your feet, or it's nice to get your feet integrated within your fills in some way. It's not a must every time. So sometimes you'll find you create a fill, you create a rhythm, put it on different voices, and you're like, that's good enough. You don't want to add any more. And that's totally fine. You don't have to add any more. But I like to practice adding my feet in fills. So here's what we got. We just got the foot on straight quarter notes, okay, on counts 1, 2, 3, 4. If you wanted to, you could also put in the hi-hat part there, which would even make it more complex. I just want to keep it simple, though, with just the bass drum only. And that is the Drum Fill Builder. First step rhythm, second step voice, third step feet, or foot in this case. Now I want to quickly talk a little bit about how to actually practice these fills when you come up with them. Okay, so you might come up with a whole fill, all 3 bars at one time. I don't want you to go straight to the third bar and say, I'm going to practice that. That's not the point. The point is to actually break it down from the beginning and almost reverse engineer this fill to make it easier for you to learn and play something more complex. So if I were to practice exercise number 1, I would play a beat, and then I would play the first bar as my fill, like this. Once I've got that for 2 minutes straight perfectly at a tempo of at least 60 beats per minute, then I'll move on to the second bar and I'll play the different voices with that rhythm. So here's how that would sound. So I'm playing 1 bar of beat, just a simple 8th note beat. I'm not really focusing on that now. And then I'm playing 1 bar of the fill I'm focusing on. The next thing you want to do is basically play the final version. Once you're able to play that at 60 beats per minute for 2 minutes straight perfectly, you move on to the final version, and that would sound like this. Now I want to put this in context and play it with an actual metronome. So I'm going to set the metronome at 60 beats per minute. I'm going to play 1 bar beat, and then I'm going to play 1 bar of the rhythm portion of the drum fill builder. Then I'm going to play another bar beat, and then I'm going to play the second bar, which is the voice portion of the drum fill builder. Then I'm going to play another bar beat, and finally add in the feet for the third step within the drum fill builder. And I'm going to play this at 60 beats per minute, and there's going to be 2 rotations. Here we go. So you can really see how the fill is built by starting it off in its most basic form with just the rhythm only, then adding the voices, and then finally adding in the feet. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to play this up to tempo for you guys at 120 beats per minute to show you guys how it sounds once you actually got it. Now we're going to start getting a little bit more complex. The next exercise starts with 16th notes on the snare drum, and that is our rhythm. So I'll play a bar beat, then I'll play the 16th note rhythm on the snare drum, another bar beat, and the 16th note rhythm. Once you've got that down, and it's simple, you move on to the next bar. What do we have in the next bar? Well, we're basically moving the voice around the toms. So we're doing 2 on the snare, 2 on the high tom, 2 on the snare, 2 on the mid tom, 2 on the snare, and then 6 on the floor tom, which sounds like this. And finally, we're adding a simple bass drum part on all 4 counts. So let's play this at 60 beats per minute, and you can see again how the whole fill comes together. And now let's play the final fill up to speed at 120. The third one is even more challenging because we're starting to break up the rhythm. There's not this constant notes going on like 8th notes or 16th notes. And this is where it's really important to learn the rhythm first. So what is the rhythm? It's basic 16th note, 8th note, and quarter note rhythm. So let's first just learn that and break down exactly what it is. So hopefully you're tapping along with me, whether you have a practice pad or you're just playing on your legs with your hands. But it's really important to internalize and learn that rhythm first. You really need to be able to play that perfectly before moving on to the voice section of the drum fill builder. Okay, so now let's start moving it around. What do we have? We start on the snare, move to the high tom, move to the floor tom, back to the snare, and then the floor tom, which sounds like this. And finally, we put in the bass drum, which is probably going to be the most challenging part for you in fills that sound and look like this. So the bass drum is on the E of 1, and then it's on the AND of 3. So let's build this up with a metronome at 60 beats per minute. Now, once you're able to play the final version with the foot, with the voices, and the correct rhythm, you can start to speed it up. So I'll play this now for you guys at 120. Now, before we go any further, I want to mention one quick thing, and that is not all the fills that you write or come up with are going to sound good. And that's been the case for me. I sometimes have written certain things using this drum fill builder, and I play them like, oh, it sounds horrible, and this would never work with the style of music that I'm playing. And that's totally fine. Just because you spent some time learning the rhythm and learning the voice and stuff doesn't mean it's a waste of time. There's always techniques that transfer over as far as movement around the kit, rebound from the sticks. You know, you're working on many, many things every time you sit down at the kit, even if your end result, being the fill, doesn't turn out exactly the way you want it. Okay? So don't be discouraged if you get a fill that just sounds bad or a fill that you don't like or someone else doesn't like. Just move on to the next one. And that's the beauty of the drum fill builder. It's so easy to write your own fills and to come up with new stuff that you can literally write 1,000 fills a day if you wanted to. Okay, so for the next fill, we're going to be actually moving towards triplets. So our rhythm is going to be based off of triplets. And the sticking we're going to be using is right, left, left. So this is how that sounds. And if you're having trouble getting that rhythm, one thing you can do is just practice singing it. Da 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 da. And even if you're really struggling with it, you just go away from the kit for a while, keep the rhythm in your head, and just sing it as you walk around the house, do homework, drive in the car, or whatever you want to do. Just sing the rhythm, get it into your head. Next time you sit down at the kit, I guarantee you it'll be way easier. Okay, so from there, we're just going to add the voices in. We're moving to the high tom, the floor tom, the snare, and then a little bit on the high tom. Here we go. Finally, we're going to add the bass drum in. And again, it's just a very simple bass drum part. It doesn't need to be crazy complex. Don't think that you have to challenge yourself with the most complex fill every single time. Sometimes the most simple sounding fills are actually the best fills. So what we've got here is the bass drum on counts 1, and then the and of 3. So let's build this one up again, starting at 60 beats per minute. Now up to speed at 120 beats per minute. And now we continue building fills, and we're actually going to get to some more complex 16th note triplets. Again, first learn the rhythm that your hands are playing alone with no feet and not even moving around the kit. Next, let's move this around the kit, just as written on the sheet music. And finally, add a bass drum in. Now, the bass drum here is a little bit more complex, and this is something I like to do just because it challenges myself, especially at the higher tempos, to play a really quick double with my right foot. If you need some practice with your right foot, you can go ahead and check out the lesson within Successful Drumming on heel-toe technique. Again, let's build this fill up at 60 beats per minute, starting with just the rhythm, moving to the voice, and then adding in the feet. Now let's play this fill up to speed at 120 beats per minute. The next fill may look a little bit complex, but it's basically just a combination of rests and dotted eighth notes and stuff that we've talked about earlier. So let's just simplify it and figure out the rhythm here. So we have 1 E and a, 2 E and, 3 E and a, 4 E and a. Okay? So 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a. Let's play that on the snare drum. Now that's a fairly complex pattern, one of the more complex patterns we've learned with the drum fill builder. So the next thing we're going to do, after we get that, after you can play that for 2 minutes perfectly at 60 beats per minute, then you move on to the voice portion. So now let's play that rhythm using the different voices of the drum set. And there's one thing I want to mention, and that is take a look at the of 4. Okay? We're playing 2 voices at the same time. And that's something you can choose to do when you're writing your fills, because you do have 2 hands, you're welcome to hit 2 things at the same time. Now, the rhythm stays the same, right? Because there's 2 things hitting at the same time. It doesn't really change the rhythmic portion of the fill, but it does change the voices portion. So I'll show you how that sounds. And finally, we'll add in the bass drum. The bass drum is on count 2 and the of 2. Here we go. Now let's build this fill up at 60 beats per minute. Now I'll play this one at 120 beats per minute. In the next one, we're going to continue mingling different note values, and we have 16th note triplets and 16th notes. Now, this is something I want you guys to experiment a lot with. I know you have an understanding of all the note values, so go ahead and try and throw 16th note triplets in with quarter note triplets or eighth note triplets or whatever, but just really experiment with different rhythms because you never know what you're going to come out with. So this rhythm sounds like this. Now, I started to move it around the drums, and I just kept it really simple. Again, I want to stress the importance of keeping things simple. Just don't make them complex for the sake of making them complex. Try and make them musical for the sake of music. All right, so here we go, playing the next example using the different voices on the drum set. And finally, we're going to add a simple bass drum part in when we hit these toms on the and of 3 and again on the and of 4. Now let's put it all together and play it with a metronome at 60 beats per minute. All right, now I'll play it up to speed at 120 beats per minute, but I want to mention one quick thing is you don't always have to go at 120 before you feel that you're finished the fill. Generally, 16th note triplets at 120 can be quite fast, and so if you're just starting out in the drums, get it to 80, 90 beats per minute, and then just move on and start practicing another fill. But I'm going to play it for you guys at 120 beats per minute. number 8, we're going to continue to challenge ourselves by just experimenting with different note values. You know, this fill, in my opinion, is not the greatest sounding fill, but I wanted to keep it in here just to kind of give you guys an example of how these things come together. So just take a look at the sheet music. You'll see we have a set of quarter note triplets all the way to count 3, and then we have 2 16th notes followed by an 8th note, and another 2 16th notes followed by an 8th note. So here's how this sounds. Next, what I've done when I actually started adding the voices in is I've added a flam on each quarter note triplet, and this just gives the note some thickness. And this is something you can consider doing too. It doesn't really change the rhythm at all, adding a flam, and that flam is just, you know, when you drop this stick earlier and it's a very quiet stroke, and this stick higher to make one kind of thicker sounding note. And I'm doing that on the snare, the high tom, and then the low tom. And then I just do a simple pattern on the drums to end off the fill. So that looks like this. And finally, we're just adding a simple bass drum part in there to kind of finish off the fill. Here's how that sounds. Now, I know it sounds a little bit weird because you don't necessarily have a reference, you know, either a guitar player or a band playing along with me. So what I'll do is I'll play with a metronome starting at 60 beats per minute, and we'll build the fill up just as it's written. And now up to speed at 120 beats per minute. So hopefully by this time you're starting to get the hang of how we use the drum fill builder to create your own unique sounding drum fills. It really is easier than you think. And I keep on saying this, but especially considering you have such a firm grasp of the note values, it just makes learning that much easier, and it's going to make progressing that much faster. So the next fill, again, is just a basic rhythm. You know, we're getting to the end of this, so I know you guys are probably grasping this and you're probably understanding exactly what's happening here. So we just have basic 8th note triplets for 2 counts. Then we have a broken 16th note triplet bar, just 4 16th note triplets, followed by 2 16th note triplet rests, and then another beat of just simple 8th note triplets. So this is how that sounds. Now let's add in the different voices around the drum set. Now, I want to quickly mention one thing. At the end, on count 4, I'm doing a right, left, left. For the first 2 beats on the eighth note triplets, I'm going right, left, right, left, right, left. Okay, that's just my personal preference. You can do whatever you want. You can go right, left, right, and then you'd end up crashing with your left hand. Okay, finally, with this one, we're going to put in the bass drum. Now, the bass drum is just 2 quick hits on those 16th note triplet rests. So it kind of makes the fill sound complete when you add those final 16th note triplets in there. Here's how that sounds. So it sounds pretty cool. Let's try this with a metronome at 60 beats per minute. And now let's play that one up to speed, which is a lot easier, by the way, at 120 beats per minute. And the final fill is actually the first time we're going to actually look at 30-second notes within the drum fill builder. And this is a really, really fun fill that I literally, before I wrote this, I had no idea it even existed. And so I'm sure someone else has played it before. But for me, it's actually a really cool new fill that I'm going to use in my drumming all the time. So I'm sure you're going to absolutely love it. Okay, so don't think it's ultra complex or don't get scared just by looking at it, okay? The 30-second notes are actually doubles with the hand that they fall on. So if you just play straight 16th notes and then just add the double in on those 30-second notes, it's actually very quite simple. So it sounds like this. So again, just practice singing that. Okay? Once you got that, let's add it in around the voices on the drum set. So it sounded pretty cool. Now what I've done, because the fill is already a lot of notes, we don't need very much bass drum in there. And originally when I wrote this, I just left the bass drum out completely. But then as I started experimenting around with it more, I thought, hey, I'll just add the bass drum in on simple quarter notes. So the bass drum is landing on counts 1, 2, 3, and 4. All right, so let's build this one up with a metronome at 60 beats per minute. now this one is most fun to play fast, so I'll show you how that sounds. And that's the end of the examples portion within the Drum Fill Builder. I hope I've given you a good idea of what you need to do in order to create your own fills. Now here's your assignment. Depending on your skill level, I want you to choose one of the fills that I did and go through each of the steps as I've written it. So you're not going to create it on your own yet. Learn that fill at 60 beats per minute, and whatever fill you choose. Once you can play the final version for 2 minutes straight at 60 beats per minute, then you can go on to the worksheets. And in the worksheets, what I've done is I've written you out a bunch of rhythms. Okay, and these are just rhythms that I came up with. And I want you to add in the voice portion as well as add in the feet. What are you going to do with your feet? And then eventually, you can start creating your own fills. So you can create the rhythm. You can dictate what voice it's being played on, and then you can decide exactly where you want to add in the feet. Now, another thing I want to talk to you guys about is how do you play these fills? We don't want to just be mechanical drummers who just sit there and play a standard pattern that sounds monotone. I really want you to focus on adding dynamics within these fills. Okay, so we went through the dynamics section, and you know about crescendos and decrescendos and playing ghost notes and subtleties and listening and that kind of thing. And I really need you to do that when you practice all these fills. So if you get a fill that you really, really like, stop playing it mechanically and start playing it musically. That's what's most important, is how the stuff transfers into music. And what I'm trying to do with successful drumming is turn you into the absolute best musician that I know you can be. All right, so like I said, learn one of the fills, write some of your own based off my rhythmic examples, then write some own based off your rhythmic examples. Once you complete that, you can move on to the style selector. And the style selector is going to give you a great idea of all the different styles of music, and then you can choose to write beats or fills based on that style, which is an absolute ton of fun. I'll see you there.